All right, let's take a second to just do a quick solitary singular video. See me for this, so let me get rid of myself. All right, so I'm just going to take just a minute to do a separate video to explain what we're attempting to achieve here with DLL injection. So essentially, what we have is we have a binary. We have an exe file. Let's just start that over, and then I'll do it without my finger on that button. Okay. So we have an exe file, right? And that is, of course, going to contain code, and that code is necessary for the client to run. But not all of the logic for the game, not all of the code for the game is going to be in that binary, because that's just for the client interface. There's going to be another file, which we already know to be game logic, and that is a DLL that contains the other code that we've already been looking for, as far as the games like, see, the amount of ammo that you have, the health bars, the enemy spawns, the zones, all of that's in there. And then, of course, on the other side, you also have the server logic, and we already know now that there is, a whole lot of server validation going on. But either way, the client and the server, they all talk to each other like this. Now, what we want to do is we want to take a look at some of the functions here in game logic. Let me get rid of this so I have some more space. So, for example, game logic contains, as we now know with the speed hack we just did, it contains a class for player, and that player class has functions like get, sprint, multiplier, which I'll just do that. Now, what we did when we edited the DLL directly is we actually went in there. So that's in here. We actually went in there. I'm just going to do get sprint multiplier here equals 3, right? That's how it's written in the DLL. What we did is we went into the DLL, we changed that to a different value. But once a DLL is loaded, you can't make alterations like that, which means that we can't make changes on the fly while we're in the game. And there's going to be a limit to the changes that we can make by editing the DLL, because some of them aren't just static variables, right? They're based on different conditions. So that's not going to help us out there. What we need to do is we need to inject our own code. So what we can do is we can do DLL injection. We essentially write our own DLL, which we'll call the hook DLL. And in there, we define our own player and our own get sprint multiplier. Okay? Now, our code, we can have it do anything we want, right? We can have it be if equals 1, then get sprint multiplier equals 5, or if equals 0, get sprint multiplier equals 3, back to the default value, right? We can do that in our own code. But how can we get our code to execute over get sprint multiplier? Well, what we do is we take our hook DLL and we inject it into this process. And there's a couple of ways we can do that. So the first way is we take this. Right, so the client goes, and we can do what's known as a proxy DLL, which essentially means that we have a DLL, and we change that to game logic. We just literally change the file name, because when the client runs, it's going to be looking for game logic DLL. But if we replace game logic DLL with our own DLL, and then our hook DLL, the new game logic DLL, calls the functions from the other game logic DLL, well, then it's a proxy. Everything that happens to the client connects to our DLL, and then our DLL looks in the library for the original game logic DLL, and it attempts to do that. And it just calls that legitimate code after we do our own whatever we want. Call this method 1 proxy DLL. Now, we're not going to do that. Tell you right away, we're not going to do that. And the reason we're not going to do that is because even though we have the game logic DLL and the PDB, they don't know everything that's going on in there. And we're really more likely to cause a lot of frustration and crashing the client and probably take a couple of weeks to work out all of the bugs if we do it this way. So we don't want to do that. So instead, what we want to do is we want the client to do as normal and call the regular game logic DLL. But we also want that process to attach to our malicious DLL. All right, so that it's got the regular game logic DLL loaded and everything is fine and normal, but in the process we inject our own DLL, and then we have code in that essentially will run and make changes to those variables as they're loaded in memory. So this is number 2. We call this injection. Now, there's a lot of ways you can achieve this. There's a dozen tools out there. You can use Cheat Engine itself, actually has a feature where you can do DLL injection. Guided hacking, one of your learning resources will point to Guided Hacking's Game Cheating Bible or something like that, whatever it's called, which is a good resource, but they also have a utility for injecting DLLs. In this case, I'm going to use X32 debug, and the only reason I'm using X32 debug is because I already have it. I don't have a copy of Guided Hacking's injection, and I did get a copy of Cheat Engine for this course, but I've honestly never used it for that, so it's, I guess, call it a working preference. It wouldn't take, I'm sure it's easy to use, it wouldn't take much to figure out how to use Cheat Engine in this way, but I've used X32 debug or X64 debug many times to do this, so I'm just going to stick with what I know. All right, so that is a DLL injection in a nutshell. I guess let's see if we can make things happen now and put it to use.